I was standing at Kikar Zion, which is Zion Square, the public heart of Jerusalem, where Yafo and Ben Yehuda and many more small streets intersect, and there were tears streaming down my face. It was almost the end of the first year I lived in Israel, and we were at the transformation point of Yom HaZikaron ve'Yom HaAtzmaut, the Remembrance Day that becomes Independence Day. And the words of Hatikva were closing out the tekes, the ceremony, which would communally lead us from public mourning into celebration. And like many people who have gone to day school and had a strong religious education, I have known the words of Hatikva for a long time. But in that moment, I knew the words of Hatikva. And when we reached that final refrain, Lihiyot am chofshi be'artseinu, my throat tightened and I could not finish. This idea to be a free people, despite a lifetime of being socialized, despite a lifetime of being told, grown men do not cry in public. I let those emotions sweep through me and I cried, and I know I was not crying alone. And the only thing that ended my tears was the next song, which began the celebrations, the mashup of Siman Tov, David Melech Yisrael, and Am Yisrael Chai. And it was so full of life and so full of joy and so full of hope that it too moved in me as if I had no power to resist it. And we began to whirl and spin, and the tears were drying on my face because I didn't even want to take the time to wipe them away. I wanted to hold my friend's hands close and shout towards the sky, Am Yisrael Chai, Od Avinu Chai. We are still alive. The people of Israel are alive. Our Father is alive. They were good tears. I have not cried good tears in the last few months. I have not cried in the last few months. I have cried out bitterly and angrily in private over the injustice of the world, over the blood of our people. I have felt my tears well up, and then I have blinked them away so that I can be strong in response to the testimony of survivors, so that I can bear witness to the stories of our victims, so that I can honor the heroism of our soldiers and our civilians who have sacrificed themselves to save the lives of others. And I have not found my tears to cry. It is like a twisted vidui of Yom Kippur. Here are the ways I am distressed. Look at all the ways I am suffering and been bad to myself. I have been fixated. I have slept poorly, I've eaten junk food too much, I've been disassociating, I've been staying in bed, I've been sullen, I've lost my temper, and I cannot confess to tears. I have no tears. But Joseph, the hero of our parsha, he does not have this issue. Joseph cries more than any other figure in the entirety of Torah, which is saying something. Because throughout the book of Genesis, of Bereshit, tears fall regularly and often. Hagar cries bitterly at the thought of the death of her son in the wilderness. Avraham weeps over the death of Sarah. Esau cries out when he realizes that the blessing from his father has been stolen. And Jacob cries too. The first time he sees his wife Rachel, he kisses her and bursts into tears instantly. And later on, when he finally sees his brother for the first time in many years, they put aside their hatred and weep in each other's arms. And one final time, Jacob cries when he hears that his beloved son Joseph has been lost, consumed by beasts, and that the only piece that is recovered is this bloody, torn coat. But Joseph cries more than all of them. In this week's parsha, Miketz, and in the next few parshiot, Joseph will cry out 8 times. And none of those tears have anything to do with his immediate suffering. No tears come when he is set about set upon by his brothers or sold into slavery. He does not cry when he is betrayed by his master for a crime he didn't commit, nor does he weep when he is imprisoned or forgotten by his so-called friends. Joseph's tears are reserved for something else entirely. Joseph's tears first flow when he listens to his brothers speak Hebrew amongst themselves, when he hears them recount how they are being punished on his behalf. Reuben scolds the other brothers, reminding them that they refused once upon a time to listen to young Joseph, that he cried out from the pit, that he cried for mercy, he cried for forgiveness, they ignored him. And this admission that his brothers heard him, it brings Joseph to tears. He turns aside from them, he tears up discreetly. According to Rashi, he walks away for a moment, and then he regains his composure. He faces them again, and iron-willed, he seizes his brother Simeon as collateral for the food and the wealth that he will give them for their father. He cries next at the very first moment that he sees his brother Benjamin. Upon seeing his only full brother, he retreats so that he can weep, so that he can remask, so that he can regain control of himself. Rabbi David Kasher says, Joseph kept his crying only inside. In public, he was always stoic and inscrutable. And if there were times when he could not maintain that cool exterior, he would turn away, he would retreat, shut the world out, so that no one would ever hear his sobs. And our commentators agree, prompted by the text that says, then Joseph went into a room to cry, that he retreats privately to a private space. And the Netziv, one of our rabbis, went so far as to argue that Joseph ordered his servants to build him a small private room in the palace that was for Joseph and Joseph alone. The private room was the only place he would express his emotions that were not acceptable in public. The Meditzer Rebbe has a similar belief, pointing out that as successful as Joseph was, here is a slave who was then a prisoner who somehow becomes the prime minister, that with all that success, he still could not feel like he was anything but hollow, anything but empty, anything but shattered. And the Rav gets this from a play on the words of Hebrew, pointing out that Joseph is described as the one who dispenses the grain. Joseph was hu hamashbir. And this word, mashbir, literally the one who passes out or dispenses, is very similar in its root form of shin, bet, and resh to the Hebrew word shavar, shattered, shavar. This is a remez, a hint, a secret understanding that when the Torah says he was a great dispenser, hu hamashbir, it does not matter. It does not matter that he was a great success in the physical world, because in the spiritual world, in his own heart, in his private world, he was shavar. He was shattered, and his tears are the proof we need. It is poetically understood by Rabbi Mark Asher Goodman, who says, although Joseph had immense power on the outside, although he looked profoundly successful, he was still a distrusted foreigner in a land that was not his own, with a funny accent and a strange little native language. He was a forgotten prisoner in an Egyptian jail, a piece of property responsible for cleaning and waiting on master and mistress. He was and always would be a sad boy, thrown into a pit, sold by his brothers. And when Joseph breaks down for the third time, it is unlike the previous two textual citations, or what we perhaps would imagine those tear-stained years of public face and private heartache. We'll read these words actually next Shabbat, the climax of the confrontation between brothers, Vayigash Yehuda, the approach of Judah. Judah, who is the architect of Joseph's downfall. Judah comes forward and takes responsibility. He describes the years of grief and mourning suffered by their father. He offers himself up if only Benjamin will be spared, and face to face with true sincerity, Joseph's public persona, his face, this illusion he has created of a man who never weeps, it breaks. It cannot be sustained any longer. And the Torah says he could not control himself. "Take every man away from me," he cried out, so that there was no one else present when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And his sobs were so loud that all Egypt heard them. They were heard even in the house of Pharaoh. No longer does Joseph turn aside and cry. No longer does he retreat and cry. He weeps. He feels. He cares nothing more for the social graces or societal expectations that say you need to be strong. He doesn't care who sees him, not those beneath his power, not the brothers who once hated him. And when that cathartic crying ceases, his very next words are, "Ani Yosef," I am Joseph. The Rashbam says, until now, everything he did was so that he could control his heart. For years, Joseph has strangled his tears. He has hidden them away so that he could keep his identity and his power, and he has been saving his tears to be wept alone in a tiny cell so that he would never have to admit who he really was, who he still was, that he would never have to admit that he had a past and that he had trauma and that he had a broken heart. Until he cries. A poem by Lital Kaplan, translated by Maya Valentine and brought to us by Gadi Ben Dov. Homefront commands new regulations for small talk. What's up? Canceled. Instead, use what is shaken up, what is blown up, what is beaten up. What's going on? Banned. Alternatives, what's breaking down, what is forever gone. Instead of the rude, "How are you, mashlamech?" No. We frown in the face of our friend. We ask, "How war you?" And instead of the standard response, it is now forbidden by the most strict veto power. "I'm fine, in fact, it's all good. Atzli hakol beseder." No. We are now required to say, "Everything is cracked." And our truthful ones will answer, "Everything is shattered. Everything is shattered. Hakol shavar. Hakol shavar." Joseph, too, was shavar, said the Meditza Rav. Shattered. But in his tears he found his healing. And in his tears he found himself once more. It is only after he has truthfully wept that he can finally own who he is, that he can finally own what has happened to him. And the moment that Joseph's tears are no longer held inside, they are no longer shameful hidden things. They become tears of healing. They become tears of relief. They become tears of honesty. And he embraced his brother Benjamin, and he wept. And he kissed his brothers, and he cried upon them. And he appeared before his father and fell upon his neck and cried upon his face for a long time. And Joseph flung himself upon his father's face and cried upon him and kissed him. And Joseph cried as his brothers spoke to him. And one day we will too, I believe. One day we too will find our tears again, the honest tears of healing, like the tears of the dancers in Kikar Tzion, like the tears of Joseph. I have relief that we will find our tears of relief, and God willing, it is someday and someday soon. But until then, our sorrow should not be private. It should not only be held by us. We should not need to fight our tears back anymore to appear strong. We should not have to be stoic to honor the sacrifice of our kin. For the psalmist writes, "Shim'at tefilati Adonai," Shavati v'hazina el dim'ati al tacharash. Hear my prayer, God. Give ear to my cry. Do not disregard my tears. Let us cry. Let us be heard. And let us be healed. Shabbat shalom.